The last kind of summarizing things and making some comments will be Ann. So Ann, you're up.
And I would like to share a couple of slides if I'm able to, but it says that the host has disabled slide sharing. If I'm able to share slides, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll just start talking. And let's see, try one more time. Oh, there we go. Okay. So hopefully you can see. I have the easier task of going after you guys, so I don't have to go into as much detail about the great talks that we heard, but the difficult task of filling in for Jeff Nobles, which thank you, Tracy. I'll do my best, but I thought this was a nice opportunity since the topic that I was given was to talk about translating, was to zoom out a little bit and review a little bit about what our goals are when we talk about translating, and then talk about some of what we've heard in that context. So, in terms of some of our concrete goals, of course, we would like to have a better understanding of LGS phenomenology so we can model it, and we'd like to have models that recapitulate the features of that phenomenology. So that seems sort of obvious, but again, when we're talking about translating, it really is, let's understand the clinical phenomena, let's understand the experience of the person with LGS. And then when we think about modeling it, capture some of that. And ultimately, one of our goals is to have clinical trials based on robust clinical and bench science. And so these might be some of the research goals that we have as a community. But really, what are we thinking about in terms of long-term big picture goals? We want patients to have earlier diagnosis and treatment. We want better treatments that have better efficacy and improved side effect profiles. And really what we want is improved outcomes, whether it's with regards to seizures, preventing them or making them better, with regard to developmental outcome. And really with regard to survival, we know there's a high SUDEP risk for patients with LGS. And so we're really talking about these as our big picture goals. So I just thought I would try to pull that out of all of the detail that we heard, which was really incredible and necessary. And in all of the research that Tracy and the foundation are thinking about funding, we really need the very rigorous, very robust science, but we also need to keep our eye on the big picture goals, which is improved lives for patients with LGS. So when I was thinking about the various talks we heard in the first couple of sessions, we really did talk about defining LGS. We have our clinical observations of seizures and multiple seizure types. We have our EEG features of slow spike and wave and GPFA. And then we have our formal ILE definitions, which Elaine walked us through, which are being refined to ever reflect the evolving understanding of the field and our evolving understanding of Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. So that's all very well established, I would say, but it continues to be refined. But we're also still refining through clinical research beyond our clinical observations and aggregate understanding of all of the patients together. We're capturing the network dysfunction in our clinical understanding and our clinical phenomenology in new ways, looking at EEG and MRI technologies. We're incorporating our understanding of the evolution of symptoms, looking at natural history studies, for example, and we're beginning to think about what biomarkers might predict LGS or reflect the evolution of symptoms that are LGS. What we haven't really gotten to and that we need to think about is how do we understand how these very many heterogeneous causes we heard about, genetic causes, acquired causes, and we focused on the genetic, how did they lead to these common final pathways of LGS? And that's really where this understanding of network dysfunction, I think, comes into play. In terms of our models, we heard about a lot of important questions and a lot of important key requirements with face validity, construct validity, and predictive validity that Scott brought up. And we heard about amazing technologies and incredible ability to not only do genetic manipulation, but also have readouts that are beginning to reflect more and more the clinical readouts that we want to capture from our patients. But also the technologies are really continuing to surprise us in terms of how rich the understanding is, not only of individual cells and individual models, but also, again, this network dysfunction that we've all been emphasizing. So, with that in mind, I think we could put all these things together, and then it's just another Wordle. But really, I think it helps us to focus, in some ways, our priorities, not just on individual aspects, but really the long-term outcome question. So I thought I would just talk about what the clinical and research goals might be. Tracy, this is directed mostly to you, but really for people to comment on. And again, as Yvonne said, I'd love some disagreement, but I think we are still in the phase of refining LGS and our understanding of that, and looking at not only the specific moment in time phenomena that we see, but the evolution and the natural history of LGS. So it's very important to continue research in that area. And I think along with that, and implicit in that is identifying meaningful features and measurable outcomes for future trials. Because again, I think one of our key goals is to have improved outcomes through trials. With bench research, again, the session today was amazing and it's fresh in our minds. And we heard about animal organoid and cellular models. And I think Scott's laying out at the beginning of these really critical concepts of validity are important. We really need to think about the biological relevance of our model, the construct validity. With the genetics, we have an advantage there. We have specific genes that the field has discovered. Genomics has raced ahead and has gotten us a lot of different causes, and we have ways to assure construct validity in that area. But somebody raised the important question, what about the non-genetic causes of LGS? It's something we have to think about. Phenotypic congruence or face validity, how well do these models reflect the human condition? And I think an important thread in a conversation was that maybe not every model needs to reflect every part of the human condition, but you can find important aspects of good models that will bring to bear on future experiments, future understanding of the disease, but also future trials. And then again, preclinical demonstration of drug efficacy is going to be really important, this predictive validity. So really sort of restating what Scott said so nicely, since I think these were really critical aspects of what we need to think about in terms of high quality, robust, meaningful research in the field. So key questions in these priority areas, which phenotypes do we need to see in the models? Again, do we need to look at some non-genetic models along with our genetic models? And should we compare the phenotypes we see in the genetic and non-genetic models and try to capture that network dysfunction and the final common pathway that we always talk about in the clinical medicine side through the non-human models that we're looking at? What do we really need to see? What do we need to require in our preclinical experiments before we go to trial? And then finally, back to you, Tracy, what are the outcomes that the LGS community will support in trials? Will people sign up for trials where seizures are the only outcome? Will people sign up for trials where developmental outcomes are the primary outcomes? What are the other things that we want to look at in terms of secondary outcomes? So I think there's a lot of importance in having this sort of forum to go to the community and say, we've got this rich science that's happened, there's rich science that's happening and needs to continue to happen. But in terms of the long-term goals, how well do these various grant applications, these RFAs that are being put out, how well do they reflect what the community needs? And then finally, I'll mention that we have to remember that we can partner with other agencies. Vicki Whittemore has been very actively involved, not only in the planning of the meeting, but also in discussions. And how do we partner with LGS and other agencies, such as the NIH, AES, and others, to be able to achieve these goals? Thanks, Eric and Tracy, for giving me a chance to, again, talk about some of my thoughts in the field, and I'll turn it back to you if I can unshare. There we go.
Thank you, Ann. I think you just did my job for me, so I think we can wrap this up now.